It's been 4 years basically since we've known about Final Fantasy IX Remake. And in that 4 years, we have been wondering what is going on? When is this game coming out? Is there ever going to be anything announced on it? Because almost all the games in that Nvidia leak have been announced, but not Final Fantasy IX Remake. We've all been kind of patiently waiting, assuming that every single event, this is going to be the event, right? This is going to be the time that we finally see Final Fantasy IX Remake. And time again, it has not happened yet. However, just last night, something happened. Square Enix posted this, that they are celebrating the 25th anniversary of Final Fantasy IX, and that's huge because we got this special logo here of Zidane, Garnet, and Vivi. And what you guys may recall is that right before Final Fantasy VII Rebirth was announced, we also got a 25th anniversary logo. Icefire just pointed out in the chat, we did not get a 25th anniversary logo for Final Fantasy VIII. Why? Because there's no Final Fantasy VIII remake in development. I'm so sorry, guys. It does not seem to be happening. I know a lot of people love FF8. You know, as I mentioned, I'm wearing my FF8 shirt now. I love FF8. The primary reason that 8 is not getting a remake right now is because Creative Studio 1, the team that is working on Final Fantasy VII Remake, is currently working on Final Fantasy VII Remake. They're working on part 3 of that trilogy. And so, you know, Nojima, Nomura, those guys are the core staff of Final Fantasy VIII, and they are all busy working on Final Fantasy VII Remake part 3. So maybe after part 3 finishes, these guys will get to work on Final Fantasy VIII Remake. That being said, they've also said that Final Fantasy X-3 is one of the things that they really wanted to work on. So even still, there may not be an FF8 remake, unfortunately. But that's beside the news. Let's focus on Final Fantasy IX. So here's what they had to say if we translate this to English. Final Fantasy IX 25th Anniversary Special Page Release. This year marks the 25th anniversary of the Final Fantasy IX Kupo. We will be providing information on commemorative goods and collaborations. And there's a few other tweets here. This tweet says, information 1 of 5. To celebrate the 25th anniversary, new FF9 goods are coming out one after another. There are also figures of Zidane and Garnet, silver accessories, cute stuffed toys of the characters from FF9 Kupo. So this is really interesting, because a lot of people are looking at these figures for Zidane, however you guys want to pronounce it. I believe the official pronunciation is Zidane though, by the way. This is another Tidus situation. Everyone gets mad when I say Tidus, even though that's correct. These characters look updated in design. The way their faces are, their proportions are about the same, but this does look like it could be the character models for the characters in Final Fantasy IX Remake. The way their eyes look, the way their hair looks, I mean, this looks like they could have potentially just 3D printed the models. I know they don't necessarily do that, but it does look like these are models straight out of a potential remake. It looks very clean. Yeah, I agree. Is it just me, or does Zidane specifically look like a mix of the original FF9 art style and the Dissidia art style? No, I can totally see it. I can totally see it. Looks polished? Yeah, I agree. So moving on to the next announcement, a new recording of the FF9 theme song, Melodies of Life, has been released as a commemorative record. The warm LP sound brings back memories, Kupo. The vinyl artwork is really awesome here. This seems to be an expanded artwork of the 25th anniversary artwork to include all of the playable characters, and I like it. If this is the style of art that they're going for in the remake, then I think it will end up being fairly faithful to FF9. But first, if you want the ultimate Final Fantasy IX experience today, then you need the Steam PC version, where you can install all of these incredible mods. And our sponsor Instant Gaming can get you a Steam code for the game for only $7. They also have a ton of great deals on recently released games such as the first Berserker Kazan for only $46. And they allow us to give away a free game every month of your choice. All you have to do is click the link in the description or pinned comment below, smack that participate button, and you're entered to win. So be sure to check out Instant Gaming. And now back to the video. So the next next announcement says FF9 has released a picture book with the Black Mage Vivi as the main character Kupo. A story about Vivi's days with a certain master. It says she, but this is because when Japanese is translated, it probably didn't really use gendered pronouns, and then it just kind of assigned one to it. A story about Vivi's days with a certain master before she sets off on her journey. A Final Fantasy IX picture book, Vivi and Grandpa on the day of departure. Very interesting. So yeah, I think the translator got the pronouns wrong on that. That's the only thing I can definitely conclude there. Should NSP read the book to us on stream when it releases? Okay, I'll read the book. You know, assuming that the book will get an English release, I'll read the translation or I'll read it. I'll try to read it in Japanese, but okay. And then let's see. Eyewear brand Zoft and Final Fantasy IX collaboration confirmed. 3 types of collaboration eyewear will be released, each with a limited edition eyeglass, cleaning cloth, and case. Okay. Okay. So, yeah, if you want to clean your glasses with Final Fantasy IX chat, you're going to be able to do that. I know a lot of you have definitely needed to do this, specifically with FF9. $500 glasses cleaner? You better believe. Hold on, let's see. Can we actually see how much this is gonna cost? Because we can click through the link. That doesn't say much. Released in 2000, the 9th installment, which has sold 8.9 million copies worldwide. That's also a big thing we're going to talk about later, is that FF9 is now at 8.9 million. And this actually came through the re-releases, by the way, that they've managed to get the game up that much. Because remember, FF9 at release was like 5 million. So actually the ports have been selling. I really think that that's like in large part thanks to like Memoria Engine and Moguri mod. Gohan, thank you so much for the super chat. Gohan9845 says, don't think Kitase would want to remake FF8. He expressed how difficult it would be to remake the junction system. I think FF6 remake seems more likely. I think remaking FF6 would be really difficult, right? Because FF6 has a crap ton of playable characters. The only way I could see them actually remaking FF6 is if it was like HD 2D. Or like, maybe like a chibi style, like FF4 remake or something like that. Actually remaking Final Fantasy VI would be ridiculous. FF6 has so many characters, so if it was like 7 remake, it would be like the most insane task ever. It would take like 5 parts. It would be insane. So, but I mean, I wouldn't be opposed if they wanted to do like an HD 2D or a chibi remake of Final Fantasy VI. I would be like more than happy about it. I would be ecstatic. And then the 5th and final announcement, the Final Fantasy IX 25th anniversary lottery to be released in July 2025. More details will be announced at a later date, so please look forward to it, Kupo. Square Enix updated the sales for Final Fantasy IX. So a little bit of backstory here. Final Fantasy IX, not the highest selling 3D Final Fantasy. In fact, it was notably like the lowest selling 3D Final Fantasy for quite some time, right? Now the initial PlayStation 1 launch of FF9 sold around 5 million. Definitely is not bad, especially considering at the time they launched it. However, that was on the lower end of the series. But the PC port and the recent PlayStation and Switch ports have almost doubled the sales of FF9, which is crazy, guys, because that is likely a combination of either new people interested in picking up Final Fantasy, so there is still some interest in FF9, that or a significant portion of people who played FF9, bought FF9 back in the day, still love and want to replay Final Fantasy IX. So you can see why it nearly doubling sales from its initial release is such a massive deal. That means that FF9 still has a lot of love, right? There's still a lot of people who view this as basically one of the greatest games of all time. So that's pretty massive. That's insane. You can go and play FF9 now with Memoria Engine and things like Moguri mod that make FF9 basically play like a very, very good remaster right now. And I also think that those mods have also motivated people to either check out FF9 for the first time or go revisit FF9. And if you do go check out FF9 with those mods, you are in for a treat, guys. With those mods, you can control battle speed, you can control, there's like a mod to like mod out so that you can swap Tetramaster with Triple Triad, all kinds of stuff. So it's really cool. Do I think the FF9 remake will have voice acting? Oh yeah, for sure. I don't think that there's any question about that. Even if the style of it ends up being like a little bit more like something like Fantasian, where it tends to use like more fixed camera angles and things like that, and it's not like a super cinematic game like Final Fantasy VII Remake, which I don't really believe that it is going to be like Final Fantasy VII Remake. I do think it'll have voice acting. No, you don't want the voice acting? Bro, if you don't want the voice acting, I'm sure there'll be an option in the menu to be like, to just set like voice 0 out of like 100 or whatever. You can turn off all the voice sounds, and then boom, it'll be just like reading the subtitles or whatever, and you can just skip past all the voice acting if you want. Is it bad that I want 9 Remake to replace Tetramaster with Queen's Blood? No, it's okay. I thought Triple Triad was undefeated for like 20 years until Queen's Blood came out, and then Queen's Blood became like the best card game in FF. I do think Queen's Blood is like GOAT. It's probably my favorite mini game in FF, period. It's also why too, I think when people talk about like the mini games in Rebirth and they have such a cynicism toward a lot of their mini games, I'm like, man, some of them are really good though. Queen's Blood in particular. Honestly, Rebirth probably could have got away with only having Queen's Blood, if I'm really honest though. Giant Monkey Butt, thank you for the super chat. Vivi is one of the best characters ever, my son. Thematically, Vivi is amazing. He is one of the best FF characters ever. The exploration of life and the meaning of life, knowing that you don't have that long, is just really interesting. Really knife in the heart, man. That's the same excuse Pokemon fans make when any other Pokemon fan asks Game Freak to put voice acting in their newer games. Yeah, that's what I'm not about that, man. Like, I'm so not about that. Like, like I know like a lot of Nintendo fans will be like, no, don't add voice acting. I'm like, dude, make Nintendo pay and then just turn the voice acting off. Like, let Game Freak pay. It's not like they don't have the money, even if it's just to be optional. Like, even if it's a thing you can turn off, make them pay. And then just turn it off. Chocobo Racing in Rebirth is actually way bigger than one might expect, and it's better than the dedicated Chocobo Racing games released recently. I mean, that's the thing, right? Is that like, I do disagree with people on like Rebirth mini games. I do think that they could have like probably cut quite a few of them. It wouldn't be that bad. It'd probably actually benefit the game. We have spent 2 decades, guys, 2 decades. That's what the old heads have spent begging for Square Enix to put mini games back in Final Fantasy, right? The last time we had like a mini game Final Fantasy was like 10, maybe 15, because it has a couple of mini games in it. 14 kinda, I guess, but I don't know how you group that because it's an MMO, so it better have some other content in it other than battle content. But in terms of the single player games, we have been wanting mini games for so long and been begging for them. And then like there was also too like that huge like backlash when Yoshi P said that 16's World was like too serious for mini games or whatever. Can we not tell Square like to stop doing mini games? But actually, this is important to point out while we're here. Keep in mind, guys, that it is not just this new merch in the 25th anniversary of Final Fantasy IX that's happening right now. Final Fantasy XIV also recently had an expansion, and guess what game they heavily reference throughout the entirety of that brand new expansion? Final Fantasy IX. So between everything that's happening with Dawn Trail, between the 25th anniversary, the amount of merch that's coming out, and they have quote unquote new projects on the way, there does seem to be building a lot of hype for Final Fantasy IX. William, thank you so much for the super chat. Do you think FF9 at Switch 2 in 2 days or at the PlayStation show in May? Oh boy. Okay. What a question. What a question. I think the biggest place that they could possibly reveal it is at the Nintendo Switch 2 event. That would definitely turn a lot of heads. But again, Square Enix also has that relationship with Sony, so I don't know. If they reveal it at the Switch 2 event, I do think that that will be huge for them promoting the fact that, hey guys, we're multi-platform now. We're coming to all platforms for all our major FF titles at once. The Switch 2 Direct also is going to have a huge number of eyes on it, meaning that they're going to be able to catch a large number of people that currently have like maybe heard that FF9 is one of the greatest games of all time. They want to be able to go and play it for themselves, so they'll be able to hop from the Switch 2 Direct and go and pre-order their Switch 2 and then immediately look forward to Final Fantasy IX. And, you know, assuming that maybe FF9 Remake is coming within the next year, they would be able to go and maybe even pre-order the game. I'm being a little too wishful there, but at the very least, they'll know that FF9 Remake is on the way and that it's coming for the new platform that they want to buy. And PlayStation heads will probably be watching this show too, and they'll already own a PlayStation and they'll pick it up there. If we're talking purely on strategy, then I would say that the best strategic thing to do would be to reveal Final Fantasy IX at the Switch 2 Direct. Of course, we're gonna know in a few days, so that prediction may immediately date itself. And then this is also really interesting because apparently a Reddit user might have correctly guessed the name of Final Fantasy IX Remake. So here's what it says. There's a couple links, and then it says, there's a Final Fantasy IX 25th anniversary vinyl releasing called Final Fantasy IX 25th anniversary vinyl timeless tale that just went online. A previous user 2 months ago mentioned that he/she worked for a company where he/she could see the title Final Fantasy IX Timeless Tale Remake in a comment under a post from this very Reddit thread, Gaming Leaks and Rumors. When questioned whether it could be a TV show, they mentioned it would make 0 sense for it to be a show where I'm seeing it, but weird things have happened, could be a side game or something. Now maybe they could have just been lucky with the wording, but that's a really good coincidence at that point. So if the name of the remake is Final Fantasy IX Timeless Tale, awesome name for a remake of FF9. I also think that it's good that it wouldn't necessarily be called Final Fantasy IX Remake, assuming that this ends up being true, because I think that Final Fantasy VII has already established the name remake in such a way that means something to Square, if that makes sense. So the name remake, I would think of something like the new ATB system and the new attention to the cinematics and the new structure that FF7R presents. And FF9's remake is probably not going to be like that. With FF9 remake, I think the expectation that has been set, both by fans kind of setting it ourselves, and apparently what we've even heard from journalists too, that this is more of a faithful remake. It is turn-based, it does have a world map, it is going to be a lot more traditional to the word remake than something like FF7 Remake that's called a remake, but it's really more of what you might think of as a reimagining or a rebuild in the Evangelion sense, etc. And so yeah, this is more of a remake in the way that Persona 3 Reload is, or in the way that many other remakes that you would think of as a remake. I think FF9 is perfect for Switch. It's way more family oriented versus the darker tones of say 7. Having both present would show a vast audience how varied FF is as a series, i.e. something for everyone. Yeah, I mean, for me, right now, what they're doing in terms of say sales is not necessarily working, right? That is to say that at the very least, the PlayStation exclusivity is not really working. So I think maybe trying this from a different angle, like trying it from the Nintendo angle, trying it from a more family-friendly approach is worth doing and seeing how that ends up working out. FF9 is pretty dark though. No, I agree. I guess I mean the presentation of FF9 is not dark, to be clear here. FF9 doesn't have like or I guess to be blunt, compare like FF9 versus like FF16, right? Like yeah, FF9 does get very thematically dark, but it never has like, you know, the type of explicit darkness that something like 16 has. But I think that's okay, and I actually like FF9 more for that. Not to say that I don't appreciate 16 for like trying to be explicitly dark, by the way. I just think that like there's a certain art to presenting something that is dark, but then also can be presented in a way that like is accessible to people of all ages. Like Like, I don't think anyone would sit here and say that like Avatar: The Last Airbender still isn't awesome as an adult, but like you don't actually get like a lot of the thematic depth as a kid, but then you go back and you watch it as an adult, and then you really start to put things together, and then you're like, okay, oh my god, Resonant Arc, what's up, man? I just started a replay of FF9 yesterday for a future podcast, and it's absolutely the silliest game in the world for its first hours. It really is. It really is. Kind of the polar opposite of the way that like Final Fantasy VII opens, right? Because I think that like Final Fantasy VII, the way it opens, there's a little bit of silliness in there with like Biggs and Wedge, but I think it kind of like overwhelms you with like serious it is in those first few hours. And then it kind of dials back after that, and then it has all of its silly moments. But I do think that yeah, FF9 kind of starts silly and then it locks in and gets a lot more serious as it goes along. But yeah. And I you know, for some people too, that was also kind of why when the game first launched, a lot of people were kind of lukewarm on it because they kind of like the more serious, and I'm using this word loosely, mature look of like 7, and so they kind of like disregarded the whimsy of FF9 a lot when it first came out, and the art style and the proportion of the characters, and they were like, you know, this isn't a big mature adult game like FF7 and But you know, a lot of the fans were young at the time. We couldn't really appreciate the art style. We couldn't really appreciate a lot of the greatness that FF9 really had to offer. You know, one of my favorite games of all time, and I still think it's one of the best Zelda games ever, is Majora's Mask. But when Majora's Mask came out, guys, I hated Majora's Mask. I thought it sucked. I was like, how come you couldn't just do Ocarina of Time again? I was like, what is wrong with you? Why are you guys doing this? This time mechanic sucks. And now, I think Majora's Mask is the greatest game ever made. Majora's Mask is like a top like 10 for me, top 5 maybe even. I think that game is so cool. It's one of the best games ever made. Like the way that game approaches death and the acceptance of death and the stages of grief, my god, man, that game is awesome. But you couldn't tell me that at like, you know, I can't remember how old I was when I first played Majora's Mask, but I was pretty young. However old I was in like, what was it, 2000? Yeah, I was like, this game sucks. And now I'm like, Majora's Mask is like literally the greatest game ever made. So yeah, I love it. I love it. FF9 is quite the same in that way, where I think a lot of people disregarded it at the time. A lot of fans were younger. They didn't really appreciate it. They didn't understand how rich the themes were. They looked at the art style too. And I think they kind of disregarded the game on the art style. And they said, oh, this game looks immature. You know, it doesn't look cool. There's no cool character like Squall. And now I look at the art of FF9 and I'm like, this is the coolest shit ever. I'm like, this is the coolest game ever. The aesthetic of FF9 is like one of the most gorgeous aesthetics in Final Fantasy and one of the best video game aesthetics ever made. But we didn't know that at the time, right? You know, it's funny how some of that stuff just ages better as time goes along. And I think that FF9 in general is one of those things. As time has gone along, we developed a much deeper appreciation of it. What do I think they'll tweak about the combat in FF9 are? Well, I think that they're definitely going to make it faster. That's like one of the biggest complaints about Final Fantasy IX is that the combat is really slow, and I genuinely can't tell you why it's slow, but it is just really slow. FF7 and 8 weren't like that, but FF9 is. Now again, if you play this game on Memoria Engine, then you are able to speed the game up. So again, highly recommend if you're excited for FF9 after seeing all this and playing FF9 on Steam using Memoria Engine, Moguri mod, and a lot of the other accompanying mods. There is a video on my channel that shows you how to install the mods and where to get them. They're amazing. It is going to make the game feel basically like a remaster. It's that good. And I'm not even just talking about HD backgrounds or speeding up combat even. You can replace Tetramaster with Triple Triad. Like there's stuff like that that's like really cool. And just huge quality of life additions. You can even play the game in ultra wide at 120 frames per second. Insane quality of life improvements that I highly recommend checking out. Other than that, in terms of combat, as Chad is saying, no auto trans. I think that's also something that everyone in the world wanting from a Final Fantasy IX remake. Yeah, Zidane versus Zidane is going to be a huge deal. It's going to be a huge deal. I wonder what they're gonna go with, right? Because the Ketchi Kate Sith thing was also a huge deal, and I took an L because I was team Ketchi all the way. Like I was team Ketchi, and then it became Kate Sith, and I had to just take the L. The reason that I was team Ketchi was because I was looking at the game's original I was looking at the original pronunciation behind the character's lore. It just made sense, the myth that Ketchi is based on, and so it made sense for the character to be called Ketchi. That's an L, brother? No, it's an L because big corpos have said that it's gonna be Kate Sith, brother. I was correct. How do they pronounce Zidane in Dissidia? Zidane. Tidus is also Tidus in Dissidia. When I made my Final Fantasy X essay, I think half the comments on there are just like, it's not Tidus, it's Titus. And I'm like, dude, I didn't make the game. But if I did, I probably would have pronounced it Titus too. But if I was the voice director or whoever, whoever made the call, localization director, but his name is Tidus. Like, canonically, it's Tidus. You can look it up. I'm not saying that that's how it should be or anything like that. Canonically, and if we're being correct, and if we're trying to have like, a correct discussion about the canon, then his name is Tidus. I can never call him Tidus. I know it's wrong, but I can't. After I started calling him Tidus, I could never stop. And I also believe they call him Tidus maybe in World of Final Fantasy II. James Arnold Taylor confirmed it's Tidus 10 years ago. Yeah, it's Tidus. Like, it's one of those things where it's like, cope, it's Tidus. I do think that Final Fantasy IX, Timeless Tale, if that's what it ends up being called, I think that's awesome. There is one more other thing too that I did want to talk about, but I can't really talk too much about it. However, I can talk in the direction of it. I know that sounds like a riddle, but just bear with me. As you guys know, a Final Fantasy IX anime has been in the works for quite some time. And here's the deal. That Final Fantasy IX anime leaked out. However, I don't know if that FF9 anime is going to see the light of day. What I mean when I say that it is leaked out is that essentially kind of like the pitch for the FF9 anime leaked. So originally, I thought that this anime was going to be something like an adaptation of FF9, like a kid show that kids could watch maybe and catch themselves up on FF9 and become indoctrinated into Final Fantasy. But actually, what this was about is about Vivi's children. So apparently, Vivi created like 6 kids using his life force, and the whole thing was going to be about these kids 10 years after the defeat of Kuja, and that's what it was going to be about. And there was going to be like basically a whole sequel series about Vivi's children that takes place. And there are images and other details out there on the internet, but for the sake of me not being drone striked. Drone stroked. No, I like drone stroked better, bro. I like drone stroked better. I like drone stroked better. They're sending the drones to stroke me right now. Okay. For the sake of not being drone striked, I'm not going to show the images, go into details, tell you where you could find the leaks or anything like that. But essentially, that was the premise, and it is out there. However, the company itself is going through a lot of financial trouble, and I want to say that the project itself is up for auction. Don't quote me on that, because I have to go back and look, but they're going through it. The general sentiment seems to be that a lot of people don't know if that anime will ever see the light of day, unfortunately. I know there are some people who are going to be like, why is it this slow-ass turn-based system? FF9 Remake should play more like FF7 Remake. So no, actually, I think this is good. I think this is good for a few reasons. So there's been a lot of debate on turn-based versus action and all this other stuff. I think it would be great to see how an actual turn-based Final Fantasy does in 2025 or 26 or whenever FF9 Remake does end up coming out. So I would love to see those games end up performing well, how people do react to this stuff, if it does end up becoming a great newcomer Final Fantasy game. I raise these questions in part because I genuinely don't know how they're actually going to play out. Like, I genuinely don't know how that stuff will be received in the this day and age by new people playing it for the first time. I don't know if their reaction would be the same as ours, if they would think it's lame. Part of me just thinks that making a Final Fantasy game like that just to see what happens is interesting. Like in the modern era. I also think it's great too that I can refer this game to people and say, hey, go play this, so that you can kind of get like the ultimate feel of like what Final Fantasy is about. And I think that that's generally true of 9 anyway, right? Like it's generally true that like if you play FF9, it's kind of in a lot of ways the most distilled Final Fantasy that you can play. So having an updated version of FF9 and say, hey, go play FF9 Remake and you can truly get Final Fantasy. Because right now, kind of like if you want to get someone into Final Fantasy, a lot of people are like, oh, go play 10, right? Because 10 is kind of this mix between new Final Fantasy and old Final Fantasy. It's right in between the cross section. So it's kind of like, oh, go play FF10 and you can kind of get the full picture of FF, right? Like you can kind of like really understand FF's past and FF's present a lot just by playing FF10. So I think that FF9 Remake would actually serve as this sort of like in between one, or I think FF9 Remake could serve basically as this game that allows people to get Final Fantasy, like, you know what I'm saying? Like really grasp into like a pure distilled Final Fantasy and understand these are all the base conventions, the airship, the world map, the party members, and then these are how the modern games kind of play off of those things and change those things and really understand them. So I think it'll be fun to see the reaction to a Final Fantasy IX Remake. I also think it'll be really telling if Final Fantasy IX Remake outsells some of the recent games. I don't expect it to, but I also think that would be really funny. Like, I think that'd be like the funniest thing that could humanly happen. I don't think it will, but if it does, it'll be hilarious to me. My greatest hope actually though, with remaking Final Fantasy IX would actually be if FF9 Remake can be I guess my greatest hope is that if FF9 Remake can serve as the base for its own style of game going forward that makes new classic Final Fantasy games Final Fantasy IX style, if that makes sense. Or or in the PS1 style, right? So like if they continue to make PS1 style FF games and FF9 Remake is like the base for that, does that make sense? Like they create like an entire spin-off series just dedicated to making PS1 FF games, and then the mainline series continues to be some modernized FF style like Final Fantasy VII Remake. I think that would also be really interesting. Like Octopath, but FF9. Right, exactly. So suppose they start making like new original Final Fantasy games that are in the PS1 style, right? And then there's like a Final Fantasy like classic, and then there's Final Fantasy Modern, and the Final Fantasy Modern is something more like 7R, right? And so you have these two series where it's like Final Fantasy Modern and then Final Fantasy Classic, and they continue to make classic FF games as like this like sub-series, and they can put the Final Fantasy Classic games on Switch as well, or Switch 2 rather, and those games would do really cool. I think those games would actually do numbers, because a lot of the veterans who kind of defected would definitely come back. If FF9 Remake does it well, it could lead to new PS1 style FF games. Best outcome, right? I've been saying this for a long time, that if Square Enix was smart, there would be two Final Fantasy series, FF Modern and FF Classic. FF Modern would take the Final Fantasy VII Re-Trilogy battle system, and it would continue to make new games based on that. And FF Classic would basically take FF9 Remake and continue to make classic FF style PS1 games or Super Nintendo style games. And that way everyone is going to be getting some type of Final Fantasy that appeals to them, and the veterans would not keep dropping off, and you'd be able to have a space to attract new people to Final Fantasy. Because the problem right now is they keep creating new stuff at the risk of jeopardizing their established audience, but then failing to attract that many new people as well. So you have to do something about the veterans, and you have to do something about the new people. Just make two series. It's easy. Call them both Final Fantasy. Why is this so hard?